Hello everyone, I'm 𝐊𝐴𝐴𝐴 and welcome to Executive Corner, where we bring you industry leaders, successful business owners, market and equity advocates, all under the one roof. The idea is to help you discover the insights of the stock markets and help you understand how to create multiple passive income streams. Today's show, we have Dr. Jemma Green, the co-founder and chair of Powerledger, which was recently featured by Barclays as one of the emerging fintech companies to help tackle climate change. Jemma, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Jemma, I know that Powerledger is the operating system for new energy markets and enables tracking and trading of energy. What inspired you to start this company?
Well, we could see that the grid was only really as good as the market that sits behind it, particularly as we've got a lot of distributed renewables in our energy systems globally now. In the past 15 years, a lot of solar and wind has been installed, and that is creating lots of headaches in the grid if it's not put in the right place at the right time. And most of that renewables was installed by subsidies, but the subsidies are now being cut back essentially by governments, and we need a market to ensure that the right price signals are put in place so that we don't create the headaches on the grid like the duck curve that are caused by too much renewables when there's not enough consumption.
So what does Powerledger do?
We develop software that's used in more than 9 countries for trading of electricity, flexibility services and environmental commodities. So as an example, we've just got a project in Australia with VB, the beer manufacturer, where households with rooftop solar are selling their surplus solar to the brewery to power the brewery and are being paid in cartons of beer delivered to their house. And they're using our platform to track all the energy that is generated and consumed.
Only in Australia. So Powerledger provides this platform for a fully modernised market for renewable energy, essentially. My word's not yours, but it democratises power, does it?
Yeah, electricity for a century has been pretty unchanged, with large power stations bringing electricity in one direction to people's homes and businesses. And what's emerging now is a two-sided market where households and businesses are buying electricity but also selling electricity back to the grid and to each other. And modernisation of that is really making it as efficient and easy and sophisticated as possible so that, for example, if a house invests in a battery, they can make money for providing grid stabilisation services and pay back their battery instead of 11 years, pay it back in 6 years. And the grid benefits from that as well. So it's really about how to create the right price signal to get the right physical outcome in the electricity grids.
So you've got 20 clients in 9 countries, you were saying, and that includes Australia. What makes Australia such an attractive marketplace? Is it this rising price of electricity, which we all fear so much?
Well, Australia has some of the highest cost of electricity in the world, which makes the economics for things like batteries and solar make sense faster here than elsewhere. And also we have a lot of volatility in the price, which also creates a good business case for batteries. And the government has signalled its intention to move to a two-sided electricity market by 2025. So all of those things make it a really, and we've got a lot of sun, that's the other point as well. So I think that, and Australians really love rooftop solar. So I think more than 20% of households nationally have solar panels, and that's growing, at double-digit percentages every year. It's a very significant part of the energy system now. And in places where there is a high penetration of renewables, you often see very high electricity prices overall. And it was historically because of the subsidies which were passed through to our electricity costs, but that's no longer the case. But the subsidies actually resulted in lots of renewable energy being installed in places where there were no consumers. So, for example, if you look at Germany, a lot of electricity is in the north of the country where the consumption is in the south, which meant they had to build a lot of transmission lines to move the electricity to the market, and that added cost to the system. And it's not a very sophisticated way to build out your energy system with a blunt price signal. You would like to encourage that solar to be installed close to where the consumption is. And the software that Power Ledger has developed is about putting price signals in particular parts of a grid so that you can encourage growth of renewables in a scalable way.
And I know we've got some vision of what Power Ledger has been doing. I hope to bring you that very shortly. Can I ask you to, let's focus again on Australia. Is it frustrating for you that the Australian government has been focused on this gas-fired recovery, given that you're working in the renewable space?
Well, something needed to be done. There is a market failure. As to what the solution for that is, I think that installing a gas-fired power station really is not fixing the fundamental issue in the market. It's showing that there's a market failure and there needs to be a response. But if we actually brought forward the two-sided market initiative, that could underpin distributed storage or even larger scale storage, in aggregate, meeting the needs that the grid has in New South Wales. So it's disappointing that we haven't taken that opportunity to get to the fundamental issue and address that and are still looking at tactical solutions.
Looking at hydrogen for a moment, it's been a bit of a buzzword. Where do you see the future of hydrogen in Australia?
Well, Power Ledger has just become a founding member of the Smart Energy Council's zero carbon hydrogen certification scheme, which also includes ammonia. And that is looking at how to track green hydrogen. Hydrogen can be created from fossil fuels or renewable energy. If it's created from renewable energy, it's called green hydrogen, but you need to be able to actually track the origins of the source of energy to be able to validly claim it's green versus brown hydrogen, which comes from fossil fuels. And we're working with the Smart Energy Council on the development of the certification scheme, and we've got a project in South America for wind energy that is going to manufacture green hydrogen and export that to Europe for powering electric vehicles from that renewable source. But I think that having integrity around the provenance and tracking for the green hydrogen is really important, because otherwise if people don't believe that it's really green, they're not going to buy it. And so that we think that having it on a blockchain, which is effectively an immutable ledger that is tamper-proof, can add a lot of trust to the buyers so that they know that what they're buying is what it says on the tin. And the Smart Energy Council certification scheme is an Australian initiative. However, there are stakeholders in Europe, the German Energy Agency, and in the USA, 6 different developers of hydrogen that have also joined the Australian scheme. So it could well be that the Australian scheme becomes the default global standard.
Talking about Power Ledger's history, you only started off in 2016 and you've made quite a global footprint. How have you made that happen? What strategy have you followed?
Well, many of the clients that we've got have sort of resulted from sort of organic queries. They've heard about one of our projects and wanted to do something similar. As an example, in India, we're working with the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest and most populous state in India. They've got 90 million people living there. And they saw our project in Bangkok, which is a peer-to-peer trading project, working with our client there, BCPG, and they said, oh, we'd like to do something similar. And then they actually changed the rules in the state of Uttar Pradesh to allow blockchain-powered peer-to-peer trading. So I'd say most of it, to start off with in the early stages, has organic inbound queries. But now we're starting regulatory change, which is driving a lot of the work that we're building in our pipeline. For example, in Europe, there's a regulatory change called the Clean Energy Package, and in the US it's called FERC 2222, and they're actually establishing two-sided markets, peer-to-peer trading markets and energy communities, which are all need software to facilitate the local trading of energy, local energy markets. So now we're starting to more systematically approach our go-to-market strategy in these countries, and the clients that we're talking to are really interested in working with us, I'd say we have the track record and experience in many different countries and adapting to different market conditions.
No doubt large populations of countries like Japan and Thailand make them prospective or attractive prospects. I guess it's a bit like saying which one's your favourite child, but do you have a focus on a particular country?
Well, I mean, Australia is a small market relative to the globe, but we very deliberately set up Power Ledger in Australia because we wanted to prove that tech companies don't just originate out of Silicon Valley. And so we're very proudly operating out of Perth. Most of our people are based here, although we do have staff in the US, we've got staff in Germany, Japan, etc. But, I think probably the beer project I mentioned earlier is pretty exciting. But I would say that the regulatory changes in Europe under the Clean Energy Package require all the member states in Europe to implement local energy sharing laws by the end of 2021. So I'd say from a market perspective, that's the most exciting next step for us.
And the awareness regarding clean energy is consistently rising, of course, and the market base is also growing, although there is still a long way to go for the market to boom, since many industries are still primarily dependent on fossil fuels. You talked there of your plans for expansion. What further plans do you have in the year or so ahead?
Well, in 2015, the price of solar and wind fell below fossil fuels, and lots of people thought, the energy revolution is happening. But I think many people didn't understand this phenomena, which I mentioned before, which is high penetration of variable renewables by centralised planning has pushed up the price of electricity. So if you looked at a graph of the countries with a lot of variable renewables, so solar and wind, you have high electricity costs. And really, to transition to low cost, low carbon and stable energy systems, we need to have local energy markets rather than centralised planning for renewables. And we see enormous opportunities in places like Europe and the US and states in India, and also Australia as a result of the two-sided market initiative. So, and I think that they're the leader locations, if you like, but there are many that are going to take the lead from those and implement really exciting initiatives as well. So I think over the next 10 years, we'll start to see the need to facilitate trading with electric vehicles as an example. And if you've got an electric vehicle, that's the size of that battery is probably 10 times the size of a battery in your home. And it might be that the price of electricity that day or that evening is so high that you could make several $100s from trading your electricity from your EV. So you might leave your EV at home, go out to a restaurant and use the income from that to pay for your meal. And I mean, that might sound like science fiction, but I think that is probably only a few years away beginning to happen. And software, as well as the regulatory settings really enabling all of that, is it's very similar to what we saw in 1996 in the US as a result of Bill Clinton's Telecommunication Deregulation Act. It opened up the telco sector and internet service provider sector, and data could be moved across the internet and phone wires in new and cheap ways. So it used to be like long distance calls cost a lot, several dollars a minute, but that's no longer the case. And a similar thing is happening in electricity markets now. And I think the idea of citizen utilities and citizen power stations and shopping centres also being power stations, I think, is something that is happening as we speak. There are so many things happening in the sort of second wave of renewables, which we call a market-based mechanism. And the first wave was really about subsidies, and the next wave is really about markets, and Power Ledger is really excited to be a part of that.
And Jemma, I'll just finish the interview with having a look at the emerging markets, I suppose, and I know we've already touched on it, but brands like TTED from Thailand, CUB in Australia, they've leveraged from your services. How's that been achieved? And enlighten us, if you will, on the current clientele and where you see these emerging markets.
Yeah, well, Carlton United Brewery actually approached us on LinkedIn. They heard about what we were doing, and they wanted to do a peer-to-peer trading project with their customers as a brand engagement piece. And I think that there are many companies, multinationals and corporate sustainability leaders that have made public commitments about renewable energy, where they want to get to 100% renewables by 2025 or 2030. And the way that they can do that is by buying electricity from a solar farm or a wind farm, or putting solar on their roof space, in their factories and build offices. But the other way is to buy energy from their customers themselves and pay them in store product and vouchers. And we see enormous opportunity for that, like a loyalty and engagement program. So supermarkets, food and beverage outlets, telecommunications providers buying their energy needs from their customers and paying them. And so everyday people can, sell their surplus electricity to their favourite brands. We're seeing great interest for that, what we call loyalty peer-to-peer trading of electricity in the US and Europe, as well as in Australia. And this, I think, is something that can happen right now with, so many households already having rooftop solar. So they don't need to, invest in a battery to be able to trade electricity. They can just join, in the case of Australia, Carlton United Brew with our partner retailer, and start trading their electricity and have cartons of beer delivered to their house this year.
And is that happening anywhere else in the world, Jemma? Cartons of beer being used as payment?
I think it's a world first. I don't like to use that phrase too often because it sounds quite cliche, but I think because we're talking about beer, it's fine.
Okay.
But Carlton United Brewery made a commitment in 2018 to get to 100% renewables by 2025. And they also have made a lot of commitments around sustainability, in modernising the way that, beer is manufactured. And they're an Australian brand. However, they were recently acquired by Asahi. So they're now owned by a Japanese company, and they're pretty avid beer drinkers too. So there's quite a lot of interest on the beer front in Japan as well.
And of course, we're not endorsing alcohol consumption here, but thank you so much, Dr. Jemma Green, for your insights this morning. So interesting to see what you're doing in the renewables space, and giving those insights to us about some of the areas that we need to watch, and particularly the corporate world continuing to lead that charge. Dr. Jemma Green from Power Ledger, thanks for your time.
Thank you.